On a quiet afternoon in a small suburban park, a group of teenage boys gathered near the playground, their laughter filling the air. However, this was no innocent fun. These boys, brimming with arrogance, had spent the summer tormenting others they deemed weak. Today, their target was an elderly black man sitting calmly on a bench, engrossed in a weathered book. The man, Kane, was dressed simply in a plain shirt, worn jeans, and an old hat pulled low over his face. To the boys, he appeared like an easy victim. The tallest boy, swaggering with misplaced confidence, sneered, "Look at that old guy. Bet he can't even walk straight, let alone defend himself." The group chuckled, their intentions clear, and approached Kane, circling him like predators. Kane appeared undisturbed, his eyes fixed on his book. One boy leaned in mockingly. "Hey, old man, what are you reading? Can you even read?" Another chimed in. "Shouldn't you be somewhere else? Like back where you came from?" The taunts grew louder, but Kane didn't react, his fingers calmly turning the pages. Frustrated, one boy stepped closer, puffing out his chest in a show of dominance. "Come on, old man," the boy sneered. "Think you're too good for us?" As his hand rose, ready to strike Kane, the man moved with startling speed. His hand shot up, gripping the boy's wrist with unexpected strength. The boy froze, his arm immobilized as Kane finally lifted his head. His calm, authoritative gaze locked with the boys, silencing the group. Nearby, an elderly man walking his dog stopped abruptly, his eyes widening in recognition. He hurried over, shouting, "Stop! Don't you know who this man is?" The teens turned to him, confused and nervous. The old man continued, his voice filled with awe. "This is Kane, a master martial artist and former karate champion. He could take all of you down in seconds." The group stood speechless, pale with fear and realization. Kane released the boy's wrist and said softly, "You acted without thinking. That's how people get hurt." The boys stepped back, their bravado gone, replaced by stunned silence. Kane's calm demeanor remained unchanged as he looked at each of them in turn. "Strength isn't about hurting others," he said, his voice steady but firm. "It's about knowing when not to. Hurting you wouldn't teach you anything." The boys hung their heads as Kane's words sank in. "You think it's fun to pick on people you believe are weaker," he continued, "but you don't know their stories. Prejudice and ignorance come from not understanding others. If you keep living with hate in your hearts, it will destroy you." The elderly man who had recognized Kane stepped forward, shaking his head. "You're lucky he didn't respond the way you expected. Kane isn't just a fighter, he's a man of honor who believes in teaching, not punishing." Kane nodded in acknowledgement, then turned back to the boys. "You're young," he said gently. "You have time to change. Don't judge people by their looks or the color of their skin. Take the time to understand them. Everyone has a story." The boy who had tried to strike Kane stammered an apology. "We didn't know," he said, his voice trembling. Kane's expression softened. "That's the problem," he replied. "You acted without knowing. But life is about choices. You can choose how you treat others, and that choice makes all the difference." With that, Kane returned to his book, the peaceful man he had been before the boys approached. But they would never see him the same way again. They came looking for a victim and found a teacher instead. The lesson of respect and humility they had received was one they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. As the boys walked away, the elderly man patted them on the shoulder. "You learned something important today. Don't forget it." They nodded, humbled and reflective. Kane, meanwhile, smiled faintly as he resumed reading. He had always believed in teaching through wisdom, not violence, and today had been no different. Weeks passed since that transformative day in the park, and the boys were no longer the same. Their encounter with Kane had left a profound impact, reshaping how they viewed the world and treated others. Gone were the days of bullying and thoughtless cruelty. They now carried a sense of responsibility for their actions. Their conversations had shifted to more thoughtful and kind reflections. One afternoon, by sheer coincidence, the boys found themselves back in the park. As they walked along the familiar paths, they spotted Kane once more, sitting on the same bench with his weathered book. But this time, instead of approaching with misplaced confidence, they walked toward him with respect and gratitude. The boy who had tried to strike Kane stepped forward, nervous but genuine. "Sir, Kane," he began hesitantly, We didn't expect to see you here again, but we're glad we did. Cain looked up, a soft smile spreading across his face as he recognized the group. He set his book aside and nodded. "I remember you boys," he said, his tone calm and warm. "How are you?" The boys exchanged glances and one of them spoke up. "We've changed since that day. You taught us something we didn't even know we needed to learn. We just wanted to thank you." Cain's smile deepened as he replied, "I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes life gives you a chance to see things differently. It's up to you to decide what to do with that chance." Encouraged by Cain's words, another boy hesitated before asking, "We've been talking a lot about what you said, about strength and wisdom. Would you show us some of what you know?" Cain studied their faces thoughtfully, seeing genuine curiosity and respect. They weren't asking to show off this time, but to learn something meaningful. "I'm not a trainer anymore," Cain said gently. "These days I seek peace, but I can show you a little, just enough to understand real strength. Remember, it's not for fighting or hurting others, it's for discipline and self-control." The boys nodded eagerly, understanding the gravity of his words. Cain stood slowly, his movements deliberate and graceful, and led the boys to a small patch of grass away from the benches and other park-goers. There he began demonstrating simple hand movements, basic blocks, defensive stances, and calm breathing techniques. His movements were fluid and precise, like water flowing naturally, mesmerizing the boys as they watched. The boys tried to mimic his actions, though they knew they couldn't match his mastery. Cain smiled at their efforts and said, "It's not about how fast or powerful you are, but how much control you have over your mind and body. Strength without control is dangerous. Always remember that." The boys practiced for a few minutes, fully aware that what they were learning was just a glimpse of something much deeper. Cain's movements were not just physical, they embodied years of discipline and wisdom. The boys felt honored to learn even this small part of it. After a short while, Cain raised his hand to signal the end of their impromptu lesson. "That's enough for now," he said with a smile. "As I told you, I'm retired and no longer a teacher, but you've learned enough to start understanding what real strength means. Remember, never use what you've learned to hurt others." The boys nodded, their faces glowing with respect and gratitude. One of them said earnestly, "Thank you, Cain. We'll never forget what you've taught us, both today and before." Cain smiled warmly. "Good," he said. "Life is about learning and growing. You have the power to change, and I believe you will." The boys bid Cain farewell, their hearts lighter and their minds filled with the lessons they had learned. As they walked away, they realized they had been given something far more valuable than fighting techniques. They had been shown a path to becoming better men. Weeks passed, and the boys found themselves living by the lessons Cain had taught them. They had become more thoughtful, kinder, and self-aware. The arrogance and cruelty they once displayed had been replaced by humility and a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to be strong. They treated others with newfound respect and carried a sense of accountability for their actions. Cain, meanwhile, continued his peaceful life, often returning to the same park to enjoy the quiet and simplicity of his retirement. He had spent his youth mastering the art of martial discipline, but now his greatest satisfaction came from imparting wisdom and kindness to others. On one such day, as Cain sat on his usual bench with his book resting on his lap, he reflected on the encounter with the boys. He had planted seeds of change in their hearts, just as similar seeds had been planted in his own during his younger years. It brought him a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that his principles of strength, discipline, and compassion had made a lasting impact. The boys, in turn, had embraced these lessons. They carried them into their daily lives, choosing empathy over ignorance and kindness over hate. They had learned that true strength lay not in dominance or violence, but in self-control and the courage to change. For Cain, seeing the transformation in their lives was the ultimate reward. As the sun set over the park, casting its warm glow over the trees and pathways, Cain smiled softly. He knew that the lessons he had shared would continue to grow, shaping not only the lives of those boys, but perhaps others they would encounter along their journey. The cycle of understanding and respect would live on, a quiet but powerful testament to the enduring impact of kindness and wisdom. And so, the story of Cain comes to an end, a tale of wisdom, humility, and the power of choosing kindness over conflict. For those boys, it was a moment that changed their lives forever, teaching them that true strength lies in understanding and respect. Cain's quiet yet profound lessons remind us that even the smallest acts of compassion can leave a lasting impact. What do you think about Cain's approach? Would you have handled the situation differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and thought-provoking stories. Hit the like button and share this video with your friends. We'd love to hear what they think too. See you in the next one.